And I can just say, while I don't work in the sort of VC lens, part of this process for me and thinking about the ways in which I'm impacted personally is just that people like me are not in the room, right? And so when we think about sponsorship and mentorship, less than 0.2%, not 2%, but 0.2%, less than 0.2% of all early stage venture funding goes to Black women. And so as I sit here as a Black woman in particular, and we talk about gender equity, a lot of the gender equity work has benefited white women solely. And so you see women, Black women, Indigenous women, Latinx women, right, left outside of the conversation or the benefit of those initiatives. And even those initiatives are still struggling to get to equity and parity for women, all women writ large, right? And so I think one of the most deeply challenging things is just when it comes to seeing someone who looks like you and kind of aspiring to be a CEO. There are virtually no Black women who are CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. When you look at boards, there aren't Black women on boards. And so when I think about my personal experiences where I'll talk to people and they'll be like, oh my gosh, you're brilliant. We love what you're saying. And I'm like, great. And I'm like, invite me, or, I'm not being invited to those rooms, right? I'm not being compensated for my work, or I'm not being invited to the rooms to talk about my expertise, or, this conversation about diversity has reached a fever pitch, but people don't view diversity as a competency. It's like, well, we want to hear from the hedge fund folks. We want to hear from the finance folks. We don't see diversity as a specialty or expertise that can be added to a board or to conversations at that level. And so I think there's that sort of broader layer, but I think more deeply personal is that a lot of this work comes with great risk. It's interesting to see so many companies say Black Lives Matter, for example, in this year, when 4 years ago that could have been detrimental to your entire career, right? To say that out loud, no one wanted to say it, no one wanted to tweet it, no one was willing to engage it. And to take it a step further, I've been in rooms with decision makers who were, attempting to hire friends and promote them up 3 levels, even though they were white men. And where I pushed back and said, is there a veteran, someone with a disability, a woman of color, a person of color who could fill this role? And I was removed from my position. I either had opportunities taken away from me or was outright let go. And luckily that worked out really well for me in the end. But one of the things I always stress to folks is in this diversity and inclusion work in particular is that it comes with great risk. And sometimes you will be moved out of positions, denied access to rooms. And so where people are in those spaces, I'm thinking about all of these stories and how many of them ended with, I just did my best to get out of that situation. I couldn't say too much, right? Because the other end of that is if I said something that was a little too risque or that was a little too unnerving to the person who heard it, I could have been denied funding. It could have meant the detrimental end of my entire company and life's work. And so I think a lot of this is just around the things that we have to swallow, right? And kind of grin and bear just to have some semblance of success in our respective industries.